excited to have you here today, guys. I'm with Tye Abbott. He's a game developer, and he kind of focuses on the storytelling aspects of games and the interactive storytelling that that method can utilize. So I want to talk to him. It sounds like a really fun concept to talk about, and so I'm gonna let him introduce himself and take it away, man.
All right. Hello, audience. I am Tye Abbott, as he said. If you know any of my previous work, I have a game on Steam called Lucid: Parables of the Ubermensch, and I'm currently working on Artie Mars, a story about AI and the human condition. And as you said, I am very interested in the prospects of storytelling and conveyance through video games. I think it's as an artistic medium, it's burgeoning, and we have a lot of potential yet to explore as game designers, and I hope to realize some of that potential.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds really cool, man. I guess the best place to start is like, what kind of games influence you? Like, what are some games that really fit in this category that you're talking about, that kind of give us an idea of what you're talking about with the storytelling?
That's a great question. So I normally list two big inspirations. The first one I would list is Dark Souls. Dark Souls is, revered for a lot of things it does, and I adore Dark Souls. But my core engagement with Dark Souls is how it does its storytelling. And in particular, not so much a method of which it does it through, which it does great. It does it through environmental storytelling, item descriptions, letting the player be involved and immersed in a world to engage with everything. But in particular, how it has the higher level understanding and trust in its audience to allow them to interpret and see things as metaphor. The fire in Dark Souls, it has ages of fire and dark. Those can be interpreted as many things: human civilization, meaningful life, and it has that higher level ability. It invites its audience to engage with it in ways that might be difficult for some, but for those who are able to, is the most fulfilling type of storytelling I've been able to find. And that, on some level, is what I hope my players engage with my games as something to not necessarily have one correct interpretation of, but to make their own.
Okay. So, man, I never really played much Dark Souls, but I'm vaguely familiar with kind of the genre that spun out of that. But would something like the Elder Scrolls series be comparable in the fact that you go out and create your own story to bring back to tell others, and through the world, through the things you collect, that's kind of where you build out the details of your story?
Oh, Elder Scrolls is thematically similar to Dark Souls in a lot of ways. I honestly haven't played much Skyrim or anything myself, so I'm not sure how deep that narrative hole would go. My second inspiration, however, is a smaller indie game called Omori. Now, Omori is a Japanese RPG that's where you play as a little, boy who has different stages of his mind. He has a white space area, which is the representation of isolation, and it's slowly about his story of coming to terms with his past and engaging with himself emotionally. And that's separate from Dark Souls in the fact that its story is almost completely told through text and character interactions, while Dark Souls is told through environmental storytelling. But Omori similarly succeeds in allowing the player to engage with video games as a narrative through line, in that it does things that I would argue that the one thematic element that video games can do better than movies, TV, books, any of that, is the feeling of guilt. Because fundamentally, most games have you either assuming the role of a character or being a character themselves. And once you have a hyper-personalized connection with a character, it's more easily to instill feelings of guilt or, regret of said character, because you're intrinsically more connected to it.
Well, you have the potential to be directly responsible for, you're making those decisions. So you're responsible for whatever triggers that guilt,
Mm-hmm.
makes that connection that much stronger because it's something you chose. It's not something that was given to you like a book or a movie or something.
Yes, and see, when I talk about that, people tend to think of choose your own adventure book type sprawling narratives. And that's not what I do. I have a lot of respect for the people who do make those games. In my design, I normally take a very linear approach to how I design things. I personally do not focus so much on player freedom, but player agency, and that the player's involvement with the story in the portions where they do get to choose, it has ramifications, even if it is not as open as some other narratives that have been in the past, like a Telltale or an Undertale or something similar.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. So, I guess like what kind of stories are you telling with Lucid? Because I know that's like your first game, right?
Mm-hmm. So Lucid is a very artsy piece. It was something that was a passion project for me, and I didn't really think that many people would be interested, but it's gained somewhat of attraction. Lucid is the title is Lucid Parables of the Ubermensch, and when I break that down, each level in Lucid is a representation of a parable, of a warning, or of some sort of folly that people can fall into. And what it's supposed to be deconstructing is how a person that has superseded modernism and modernity and a lot of the challenges that man had faced in the past, once they step out of the cave of proverbial ignorance, how they engage with the world. So, for example, there's this one level I like in particular is, I think it was the parable of esotericism, and it's this level where you're surrounded by clowns, and they shoot up these messages on screen that say, "My message is nothing, my message is nothing," over and over again. And that's humorous in itself. It's kind of connecting to esotericism on that level. But also what that's supposed to represent is the plight of an artist who intentionally makes his art too abstract to be interpreted. Some of the parables are personal, some of them are about wider life, and some of them are just concepts I wanted to explore, but all of them are about modern life, and all of them are more so about the individual assuming those things.
Okay. And so, like these messages, these clowns are throwing them. How is the player interacting with the messages?
Lucid, as thematically, I wanted it to be a contemplative experience. One thing I found with playtesters is a lot of them wanted the game to be harder, which I can see on some level. But what I worried there was that it would sacrifice the ability for people to engage with the environments that they're presented in. The game is supposed to be a slower, more meditative experience for players to engage in somewhat in the same way that a player or a viewer would look at a piece of art on the wall and try to discern some meaning from that. I tried to present these players with an environment to engage with, some metaphor thrown in, somewhat of a narrative through line, and leave them to figure out what their interpretation might be. Okay,
so that's where like the high art aspect of it comes from, is the personal interpretation of what's being presented to them.
Yes, and I do have a thought there about some of my failings with Lucid, if you wouldn't mind if I went on.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the big failings of Lucid is that the story, if I'm not there to somewhat like elucidate what's going on, a good portion of it is completely lost on a wider audience. And that's something I'm trying to rectify with Artie Mars. Artie Mars has a very strong narrative through line. In fact, about half of the game is text and talking to people and item descriptions and things of that nature. And what I realized is I was scared of traditional narrative in the past because I felt like on some level it was admitting defeat in the video game narrative. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying more so to harness it, because there is bad elements to how video games present narratives. A lot of video games are trying to be movies when I don't think that's how video games work their best. So I'm trying to use more traditional narrative structures whilst maintaining the specific advantages that video games can offer as an artistic medium.
Okay. I guess, like, what goes into, because you're not really dealing so much in like telling a narrative, but you're trying to craft an experience that kind of gives a narrative to things. So, like, what goes into planning that out? How do you decide, what kind of experience you can try to evoke from a certain setting or something?
Well, as you can see over here, I do a lot of planning. So I can only speak to my process. Some people are exploratory writers where they like to write as they go and not plan out things. I myself try to make plot structures and follow them rigidly to try to deliver a cohesive narrative with a planned twist. Now, the way I first started off with Artie Mars, I didn't start with a game concept, I didn't start with a combat mechanic, but all I started out with was a rough plot line of what I wanted to happen. Then I started doing some rudimentary exploratory like player movement. And the one thing about games is I think that it's important to have the mechanics fused with the gameplay. And because of that, Artie Mars, even though I think it's a satisfying combat loop, did not have very much attention put towards it because I didn't want the mechanic to be bogged down and to distract people from the narrative going on.
Okay, yeah. So I guess it sounds kind of like you're going for like a more simplistic game style or gameplay aspect of it to kind of like keep them engaged in the experience and being able to kind of keep them moving down the path.
What I will say is that the first large game I ever made, Fire Macabre, I think you can still find it on like itch.io. It was a open world action adventure game with towns, menu systems, items, magic, sword fighting, and it was made in 9 months, and it had about 20 different monster varieties and very complex leveling systems, and it was awful. It was one of the worst games that I had ever had the displeasure of playing, even as a developer myself. And what I realized there was, and I think this is something that a lot of indie developers sadly do, is that they don't realize that those large systems, those sprawling systems, those are the luxury of the AAA. That's not our strengths. The strength of the indie developer is delivering simple, compelling, refined experiences. People have so many options for the entertainment they consume. Delivering 2 hours of something awesome is always going to be better than delivering 20 hours of awful.
Yeah. I used to play a little bit of EVE Online, and that's what kept me from really getting into that game. Was some of the systems could just be so complex and require so much from you as a new player that like it was kind of hard to sink into. Whereas a game like World of Warcraft, that's where they succeeded. Was the systems were very simple from the beginning, and then by the time you like maxed out all your levels and everything, it was like this complex system, but you had built it and learned it as you went. So. Mm-hmm. It's important to engage the player early.
Mm-hmm. And what you just said there is how to do complexity well in game design, to not, just push everything on the player at once. Even I employ that in my game design. Artie Mars, it has about 7 buttons you can press, 4 of which are WA is indeed a move. And it takes about 20 minutes to tutorialize all of that, because you really want to make sure that the player understands the core of your game before you start throwing added complexity onto it.
Yeah, I could imagine so. I guess like what kind of stories are you trying to tell? What is the I guess like what kind of emotions are you trying to evoke from your players?
So I think it varies from project to project. One common theme I like to explore in my art is individualism, because I think it's it's one of the things that I think is the nature of human society, that you have these tribal groups that form, and I think it's ultimately something that can be very destructive, and for the personal and the collective, where a person is subject to the will of the majority. I think I'm not like completely obsessed with Nietzsche, but I think one of his quotes summarizes it best. That it's very rare to find an insane individual. It is common to find insanity in the collective. But with Lucid, what I was trying to explore was the individual and the contemplation thereof, and to allow players to try to find out who they are, or at the very least to challenge them on some topics in themselves, or to try to find meaning within themselves on some level. Artie Mars has a more focused scope of what it's exploring. That is of, I would argue, at its core, forgiveness and forgiveness of self. The intro to Artie Mars is a questionnaire to a AI. In Artie Mars, you play as an AI, and the AI is based off of the mind of a once great inventor. It had its mind instilled and then altered to maybe be an AI, but that's not the most important thing. Basically, it asks a whole bunch of questions about various topics that are explored in the game, and those thematic through lines that it asks the player about, I would argue that's what the Artie Mars is about, or at least what I tried to present to the player.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. I guess let me ask you, what is your history with games? When did you start developing games?
I think I started I started seriously about 2 years ago. I've been making games, my entire life. I was in elementary school when we were being, taught some basic programming languages. I was making text games. I had always had a burning desire to do some game development work. So I started in earnest about 2 years ago, and I've worked on it every day since. Like I said, my main inspiration is that I think that video games vastly have not tapped into their wider potential. And, as an independent developer, I don't have many of the same restrictions as a AAA developer might have. And I think that, if anyone's going to assume that role, might as well be me.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. It sounds like you really got a good idea of what you're trying to do. So, what is the scope of Artie Mars? How far are you trying to take this?
I'm actually in the works of, if you're speaking professionally, I can also talk about game design wise, but professionally, I'm trying to secure a publisher for Artie Mars. I'm hoping that Artie Mars will be somewhat of a cross-platform release. I'm hoping to, at the very least, get on the Switch, get on Steam, get on Good Old Games, major digital distributors. I think it would do good on those platforms. I'm hoping for maybe I maybe shouldn't throw sales estimates out before I even secure a publisher. But I do hope that Artie Mars will be a real career starter to this point where I might be able to support myself doing it alone.
That's awesome. And so what about development-wise? Is this a game that could be modular, where you could be releasing updates and expanding out more gameplay, or would it be more like a Artie Mars 2 situation?
I would be very surprised if I decide to make a sequel or an expansion pack to Artie Mars. And a lot of designers have this impulse, they feel afraid of moving on to newer topics once the one thing is created. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a wrong impulse. There's many games that deserve sequels, and I'm happy they get them. Excuse me. But I personally never like to work on sequels. I like to keep exploring new ideas. Even besides this poster board over here, I have a big book of notes I've written. It has about 150 game ideas I've written down over the course of a couple months. And I know that if I tried to do sequels, much less expansion packs, I will never get through that list of ideas.
Yeah.
Although I did do an expansion pack for Lucid, but that was to thank the YouTubers that played the game during its initial release.
That's awesome. Yeah, I kind of feel the same about like storytelling and stuff, and that, you know, like there's only so much of the world that I really care to explore. So like the new like TV kind of model, streaming model, where we're seeing like these short seasons of like 8 to 10 episodes, and you know, you get like 2 seasons and stuff, like that's fine with me, because I like to explore new ideas. Even there's only so many like story templates out there, you know, but to have different characters and different combinations is more interesting than having 10 seasons of a show, you know, these same characters in the same world being explored over and over again. So I'm a big fan of like moving on to the next thing. And I think like as a creator, it's a drive, you know, like you said, if you're always making like a sequel or something, you're not getting to explore all the other ideas you have out there, you know. So it's a good way to kind of expand yourself as well.
And real quick, I'll interject, sorry. One thing I will say is that there's many games I think would work well with sequels being written about them. Artie Mars, in the way I'm envisioning the engine right now, I hope that I will leave the player completely satisfied and leave the player in a state of satisfaction with the world they've left, to the point where I think a sequel would compromise some of that artistic vision.
Yeah, that's very interesting too. That's really cool stuff, man. So I guess you have a like a test version or something, right, for
yes,
Lucid?
Lucid is on Steam. Artie Mars has a vertical slice, as they would call it in the industry, which basically means that it's about 30 minutes of the game, and it's as polished as the final version of the game will be.
Oh, okay. That's really cool.
Thank you. It's about 5 levels. Basically, well, I wouldn't want to spoil very much, but it basically follows Artie Mars as he gets to grips with the world he's in, explores some of the things that have happened in the past with the man who his AI is based off of, and then he gets to interact with a character named Danielle, who the people who have played the demo, I think, will know very well what will happen there, but I obviously don't want to spoil what happens with Danielle.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how do we play the demo? Is it just on the website, or do we have to install it?
So to play Artie Mars, currently you will need to have a Windows computer. It is not available for Mac or Linux. I am working on that. And there is an executable and a zip version. It has over 100 downloads on it, so you shouldn't be too worried about the executable. But if you feel better, you can take the zip version. For the executable, you have to run the installer and create a desktop icon. Then you will just be able to play as normal. For the zip version, you will have to take the file, extract it, and then click on the application within the file. A little bit of a pain, especially for people who might be more used to Steam or browser games. But it is more so for right now, because I'm trying to get a publisher. I'm not too worried about the presentation thereof. If I do secure a publisher, or if I do decide to go down a different path, I will probably update that to perhaps work in a more streamlined fashion. Probably Steam.
Okay. What about like Kickstarter? Have you considered that? Is that a thing for video games?
Yes, a lot of great games have been funded through Kickstarters. I would not be optimistic about my chances of being able to finance a game through Kickstarter, and although, you know, who knows? I do think that a traditional publisher will probably be the best option. I've been taking a special care to make sure that I've chosen publishers that will not sacrifice the artistic vision I'm going for. But I would say that even giving up 80% of whatever potential profits might be made in exchange for more people seeing it, that's a worthy trade-off for me, because ultimately I don't like to see myself as a business, more so as an artist who would also like to be supporting myself through my art.
Yeah, the exposure.
I mean, I'm not completely awful in marketing. I have worked with some YouTubers that a reasonable following. Gas Hat Games, those guys are great. Mage Masher 22, Students of Gaming. All three of them have fairly large audiences. Love all three of them. They've done great work for me.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. And so you have the demo out there, but with no publisher, you don't have like a concrete release date for anything, do you?
Well, I'm going to be working on it as publishers look into it. Right now, I'm currently planning for trying to release around Christmas 2021. Maybe like a December, January release area. I'm hoping to push it out before 2021. It's by far the largest thing I've ever worked on, so I imagine it might take me a year plus, but I have been working on it for a fair bit now. Ultimately, because especially since I don't have a concrete release date, I'm taking every moment to make sure that the story's refined, that there's no typos, no bugs, that people are engaging with the combat, play testing, making sure everything is perfect. So when we do get a final release, it will be the best possible representation of Artie Mars.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you. I think it's awesome too.
Yeah. So, where can people find you online? Because you reached out to me on Twitter, and I talked to you a little bit on Discord. But let everybody know where they can find you as well.
Sure. So I do have a Twitter at Tye Abbott. That's mostly my professional stuff. I have a YouTube channel where if you are interested in the behind the scenes development of various things I worked on with in the past and in the future, I do post about 1 to 2 minute gameplay videos that you can see there. Trailers too, people that have seemed to be responding to those well. If you have any business inquiries or would like to, schedule something, you can find me at Lucid Pop. So LucidPotUdev@gmail.com for any potential business inquiries or press inquiries.
Awesome.
And I think that's it.
Okay. Well, not too complicated. You're easy to reach, huh?
I make sure to respond to every email, every Twitter DM, unless you're weird. I probably won't respond then.
All right, man. Well, it was a blast talking with you. I thought you had some awesome ideas, and I'm excited to see what you do and how you grow from here.
You